different ways. And of course, as soon as you have some idea or some question, just raise your hand and we try to make it two-way. Okay, great. So we will be discussing roles. We talked a little bit about this last time when I jumped in and talked about quality. And we will just quickly go through some of those slides and just remind you about them. We will talk about power, different roles, different goals, communication and leadership. So this is one thing we talked about last time. What are you? Where do you feel at home? Do you feel as a boss, a supervisor, or are you more comfortable as a mentor? And we talked about, mentors in the strict sense, they have no self-interest. They coach someone. They usually don't answer questions. They just ask questions. So you can't be a pure mentor as a mean supervisor, clearly. But in different roles, in different situations, you might be walking between these. And if you've been out, good friends, making friends with your PhD students, it can be very hard. Next day, you need to make priorities for your lab. And suddenly, you can go to Skövde on a conference and you go to Bahamas. Yeah, let's go back to that. We can return to that question. How about that? Okay, I was thinking of an example from real life just to show you, but this is now a highly asymmetrical relationship. So this was one of my relatives who works in a jail as an attendant. And then it's very clear, right? When he talks to the inmates, it's going to be a very asymmetrical relationship. Because when he quits his job, he can go home to his family. He can also, quit the job if he likes to. And they don't have an option, right? Someone is telling them basically everything. So he was telling us, okay, you have to make a big distinction between being empathic and being personal. When he's at work, he can't be friends with the inmates. Clearly, that does, and they might like that. They need a friend, it's a pretty tough environment. And they all have, complicated stories. So yeah, empathic. He needs to have a lot of empathy, but, he can't be friends. So yeah, something to think about, because now when you became faculty, you crossed the line. You can't join the postdocs and the PhD students because they don't want you there, because now you're faculty. That can hurt. How many have felt this? Yeah, isn't it sad when they look at you and you represent the other side? Yeah, that's how it is. No turning back. Yeah, so this is another thing we talked about last time, just touch upon this, to remind you have a lot of power. So you have the knowledge and skills, contacts to people, network. Your student would like to share that. Established name. They want you on their paper, hopefully, because then they get read, because people see your name on the paper and they think, that's a good paper. And you have leadership of your project. You're in charge of the funds. We talked about going to Bahamas on a conference as opposed to going to Södertälje. You're in charge of allocating funds, time, who does what, and those things. You can write recommendation letters, and they can have different content. Sometimes people care a lot about a good recommendation letter. And you can invite people of different sorts. And you probably know your school better than they do, so you can initiate a meeting with, FA or head of school, they can do it the same, right? But they might not feel the same as you do. But of course it will be different, right? Expectations on you from head of school will be different from expectations of your PhD student. Yeah, so I was thinking now, think about the first speaker, Malin Selleby. She was talking about her personal leadership and her role as a main supervisor. So in terms of formal power, we will be discussing rules and regulations next time. But she's a main supervisor, and one day you will be. Then formally, you have exactly the same authority, legally and rule-wise. Can anyone think of, in factual terms, why could it be different? Why could someone feel, well, she has a much stronger stand among her PhD students than I have? No? Everyone feels they have exactly the same experience, yes? Contact. Well, I wouldn't. I would feel, I'm totally confident that she has a totally different standing as I have, because they listen to her. Even if you have formal power, if nobody listens to you, you don't have real power. And the day your student stops listening to you, you're in serious trouble, because then you can say, well, I have decided. And they are like, yeah, who cares, right? That could be a tough situation. So how could she obtain that position of someone who you listen to, who you want to work with? It's a really desirable situation, and I'm sure she is working very hard to get that confidence from her students, why they trust her. She respects them a lot. You could see that, right? And cares for them. She shows, she is sharing their burden. Right. So we go to goals. Thinking a little bit about this asymmetrical situation. What are your goals, and what are your PhD students' goals? Okay, simple question. First, what's the goal of your PhD student? The one goal. Yeah, get your PhD, graduate. Yeah. There's no other goal, really, in the short, in that, as a capacity of a student. But what are your goals? What do you want? You're not going to get your PhD, so yeah, any ideas? What do you want to do? Sorry? Publications, yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Sorry? Project completion, yes. Project completion, yeah. Yep.
My first PhD, for me, it was the same goal, because you need to have.
Good. So you have some. Okay, thank you. So Dillian was saying he had the same goal as his first student, that they would get their PhD because he wanted to get promoted, and there's a rule, and maybe not only a reason. I think he wanted them to complete for many reasons, but one reason was you had to in order to get promoted. Yeah. So you want many things, and I guess one crucial thing is, as this was an example, try to align your goals. Then it's just no compromise. You want the same thing. So think about how can things be aligned as most especially like in EU projects, you know, you can't put them on the payroll for doing courses. We require you, you know, to have them read courses, but this can't be entered into the spreadsheet of EU projects. So think about that. In fact, the advice has been, you know, already when you plan your EU project, try to map it to the KTH and Swedish rules as much as is possible to see, because, you know, more overlap, less problems. So always just try to see how can you, even from the beginning, make this EU project feasible using a Swedish PhD student. Then things is easier. And your own plans. Yeah, we talked about this, conflict of interest. So you can reread it from last time. Just different goals. And we talked about this, why be a good supervisor? Just hypothetically speaking, if you just think purely egocentrically, of course you don't, but this is just a hypothetical argument. Why would even, you know, from this reason, there would be reasons to be a good supervisor. And we talked about, you know, the serious time you spend with this person, serious money, could be deliverables. You talked about completing a project. Yeah, why would you also be good? Well, you know, you looked for this talented person, probably a very talented student, you know, wants a good project, wants good leadership. They could be extremely frustrated if you don't match their expectations. Yeah, you'd rather work on the happy side than on the not so happy side. So rather spend some time on, you know, careful project management rather than endless meetings with some kind of situation and discussion of negative thinking. Yeah. And in the bottom line, of course, now we heard you need for your promotion to finish up a couple of PhD students for your promotion. But apart from that, if you don't really, you know, if you don't like being a supervisor, you don't like that kind of job, maybe you don't have it, you don't have to. You could have postdocs, you can have research engineers, you can have other kind of faculty where you don't need the coaching, you can just, you know, lead a project. Asymmetrical. So what about this? Can you or can you not? Or you need to help me out here. What do you think? It's a big no-no. Okay, why? Why not? I mean, it's a... Yeah, some labs are very tight. They share lots of things. No, I'm just...
What kind of labs they go to?
I know concrete labs, famous labs, where it's like a melting pot of some sort. Yeah, well, good. So what different aspects could you think where this is not a good idea? Yeah.
Respect for the project, you should never think in those terms. You should manage and you don't end up in those kinds of situations.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Any other thoughts about this? Yes?
The way the question is asked, the answer is yes, and there are many examples. But maybe the question is should you have them? Is it okay to have them?
You mean can opposed to should?
Arguments why you shouldn't, then some departments have needs to switch supervisors. Many departments do not allow this. But some do, I know cases. So the answer is very simple.
No, it's not simple. That's why we're bringing it up. So just to sort of think about their consequences. So yeah, so Dillian was saying some departments, yeah, it seems to happen. So here are a couple of different dimensions, ethical aspects. You know, think about why do we have rules for, doctor-patient relationship? There's a good reason, or teacher-student. And now it's superior and co-worker. There are reasons why we have these ethical guidelines. And KTH has one, by the way. So it's very clear. You shouldn't have, your partner should not be your nearest boss or your nearest person you supervise. And if it is, then we need to change the organization and someone gets a new boss or a new person to guide. So if you're a main supervisor, most likely you need to step down. It's as simple as that. Yeah, also legal, conflict of interest, because you will be signing papers. They could have expenses, and you will be signing the courses, and that would be conflict of interest. Yeah, where when you sign it, you can't do it. And practical, of course, lots of ethical, practical, human aspects of this. Imagine the nightmare in your lab as well. Your integrity, could the other people trust you to be objective? No, you're not objective, so you lost that. That's going to be tricky, difficult. And the other person is suddenly not a member of the PhD student group anymore because it's, sleeping with the boss. That's who, right? So lots of things to think about and be aware of, right? So I think the regulation says we just need to notify our own boss should something happen, and then we'll sort it out, organizational. But as said, most likely the student would leave to another lab or another main supervisor. Yes?
So what about colleagues, or for example, in your group? What about your colleagues or in your group, for example,
Colleagues? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Not of this sort, because it's not a hierarchical thing, right? They don't have any power. They're equal in terms of power. Of course. Yeah. Depends. I mean, do you think if it happens, right? Yeah. But of course, you could think about organization-wise if they should be part of the same project, if it works or not works, or if they break up and suddenly they need to keep working. That. Sorry. But they think it's okay, but maybe, funny things start to develop. Maybe you email the student and suddenly the postdoc says something, like back off from the student, and then you get this triangular circus running. That I've seen it. I've mailed colleagues and getting return mails from their spouses. That's so odd. and you're like, whoa, who am I talking to? It's a two-headed thing. Yeah, it happens. But you know, you hope people, you need to sort it out. Maybe that could be difficult, right? Because you're a project leader, and you might need to sort out things, which could be complicated. Yeah. We talked about expectations. So this is important. Try to look into yourself. And maybe sometimes if you get disappointed or feel, dissatisfied, maybe take a step back and think, what are my expectations? Why am I getting grumpy? Is it only the student? Or, Linda talked about communication. Did I communicate my expectations? Are we understanding each other? Could there be something there? Or is it really me? What's the situation? Thinking about your expectations for your own sake, are you aware of them? Do you agree with your own expectations? You might discover, wow, this is something I feel like, but I don't want to feel like it. And communicate, that's the thing. To yourself, to your student. Linda touched upon this, like in a meeting, to be respectful. You come in time, you be prepared. Maybe not starting by saying how super stressed you are, because we saw this with the PhD students. They're getting super stressed because you tell them you are super stressed. Of course, it's a fact. So sometimes you might need to explain, why am I so upset today? Well, I'm super stressed. But careful about, spreading your stress to your lab. And argument-wise, how do you argue for something? Maybe if you say, I need this done because I promised some guys in Belgium to get this done by next month in my project, as opposed to, well, it's a good thing in your project for your PhD. This is a useful, increase of your capacity. If it's true, you could do it. Maybe if there is a discussion and you see the solution, maybe not jump to the solution, you should do this way, but maybe rather ask a question, how, something like how, open, and maybe they can arrive at some sort of answer, which is in the direction you're thinking, because then hopefully they understand what you're talking about. If you just dictate, they might still not really get the picture, because they're over here, like Linda was talking about, and you are over here. And when you point this direction, they think you're pointing that direction. So by asking questions, you might see, oh, this is where, we are not meeting. Yeah, dual sort of praises. Praises are very important. We probably spend too much time finding negative criticism, because that's sort of how we get trained, to get the skeptical eye. Of course, we need to do it, but we should be practicing much more also positive. Even if they are good, and they are good, maybe they don't know. Or maybe they still need to hear you are confirming they're doing a good job. And if they don't have a super strong self-esteem, that could be a long way to go. You might need to say this every day and confirm they're doing the right stuff, especially right now, concretely. This is great. Look here. Look what you just did. You had a great idea. Could be very hard if they're not very good, if they're not performing good. You need to find out progress in this miserable situation. That could be tricky, but you need to. Yeah. It's like, what good can I find in this? And then you need to be, yeah, great, wow, lovely font. No, but I mean, something. You need to look, because there probably is something good. You just need to look carefully. And they need it. They probably need it a lot in that situation. And if you give praise, remember, people can get jealous. So in a journal club, maybe suddenly someone is really bright and you know, every time it's just spontaneously, wow, super good idea. The other ones might get very jealous. It's so tricky. So, yeah, that's a dual sword. And if it's negative, right, maybe better save it in person. And don't wait 2 weeks, because you don't have time. So if you feel strongly, try to catch them. Right after the meeting, just grab them, tell them something, and get it done, because it's now in the right context. If you come 2 weeks later and said, in that meeting 2 weeks ago, that's going to feel awkward. Why did you wait 2 weeks? And you've been thinking about this 2 weeks, wow. Could suddenly be a big deal, right? But you just wanted to make them aware of something. Importance of information to all. We had a lab. The professor got a dual affiliation in a US university. So he would spend 6 months there and 6 months here. And when he just left us, all his PhD students here were in sync. Everything was fine. But over 6 months, of course, he couldn't keep track who did he share what information with and when. And some people are good at sharing, some are not. Sooner or later, they started to drift apart and feel insecure. And by the time 6 months had spent, they were nervous wrecks, because rumors starting spreading, people starting getting insecure. How come Bob get all the information? He doesn't love me anymore, And he didn't mean it, right? He was just couldn't keep up. He had, a handful of students in the US and a handful here. But it was very, very bad for his group. So getting super organized, making sure everyone can share it. When we had the practical exercise a couple of meetings ago, some groups said, well, a networking, which is a good idea. Ask them to network, but be clear on what does it mean. Can they set up a new project? Can they hire, well, they can't hire people, but right, they could start recruiting undergrads. Some people could get super enthusiastic. They could start a new collaboration with a new lab. But just be super clear, what is the mandate? What do you expect? What can they do? And what can't they do? So they just get in sync with what do you mean by network and get to know people. Of course, same for your co-supervisors. What are their roles? Maybe they take off and grab one of your students into their favorite project. Is this what you want? Yeah, this is not fair. We started. What do you say in the lab meeting? Someone says, oh, so Mary, she gets to go to Hawaii on this conference. I got to go to Göteborg. This is not fair. It's just totally not fair. I worked hard, and I got a paper in some journal 2 months ago. This is not fair. I mean, what do you say? Sorry? But maybe one person is on a big project with lots of funds, and it's totally adequate to go to Hawaii because it's the conference and you can afford it. And the other person, it's totally adequate because Göteborg, that's where Volvo is, and it's totally the right stuff. But still, yeah, I mean, you can't say life is not fair because, well, of course it's not. We never promised them to be fair in that way, that everyone gets to go to Hawaii, but still, yeah, think about it. You need to have a good argument they can accept. Why did you decide this? Because they will demand it, right? And they will nail you with, why? Or even worse, they don't even say it, they just talk about it in the lunchroom. And you get to hear it from your colleague. That's not so nice. I've felt that, You start to hear from your colleagues what your students say. That's not nice. Yeah, same exercise. You brought up, suppose there are psychological aspects to my student. Yeah, what can you do? I'm assuming now you're not a trained psychologist or psychiatrist or counselor.
It's very complicated because we don't have rights as supervisors. We cannot send a student to a psychiatrist. We don't have this right. Even the employer, even KTH cannot tell you
Sure.
to go to a psychiatrist. So I think I know some situations, and they can be very, very tricky.
Yeah, so the comment was we can't send them to a psychiatrist. We can't force them to visit a psychologist. But of course, you can get in touch with HR. And HR could get in touch with a student. And HR could look at the options, healthcare providers, and talk to the student and see what they are willing to do. But the point here is you don't need to solve all problems. So if there are physical problems, mental health problems, talk to HR because that's really on their table. You could talk to FA, but still FA will talk to HR about these dimensions. So maybe just be a little bit careful about what kind of aspects you get involved in. So you... Sorry?
Is it really our business at all? Someone goes to a bad director, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months, but is it really, I have to put a comment on that.
Yeah, it's
I don't feel it is really my job.
but you're still, the...
Affected, the project might be affected, but it's still, it's tricky to say that.
It is, yeah.
So I wonder, isn't there a problem that I might let HR that I would use to customize students?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Because if I am, as a student, I feel that the student is doing bad, or a student who even entrusts me that he or she has problems, that I would abuse the trust of the student if I just go and tell you
Yeah.
I mean, I would never do that, actually.
Yeah, tricky.
But am I, when legally not even allowed to suggest to the student to seek help?
Yes, of course you can. You can inform them of the, the different capacities we have at KTH. And yes, of course you can, give them the full range of different options to talk to. Yeah, but I mean, we have some kind of responsibility as being on the employer side to, look into things. But then, yeah.
What can we do? A lot of students who go to depression at some point.
Yeah.
What can we do about that?
No.
First, what is our obligation to do?
Yeah.
What is our obligation?
Yeah. Maybe you can open it up and see, ask for a meeting, see, how are you feeling? Is there something we can do at the department? Is there somebody you would like to talk to? Open questions and see, list the different. They can't hear me. Yeah. So I think what can you do was the question. Well, you could, you can sort of list the options and hypothetically, say, these are different possibilities, and, ask them to think about it. If they don't want to, it could be a more tricky situation. Or maybe, do you have some friend to talk to? Yeah, but then, at one point you had the confidence question, but at one point you might be getting seriously worried about their, situation. You might talk to HR anyway, because they will never share it, right? Yes. Yes, please.
Heta stolen. Okay, so of course, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So of course you don't want to betray them. It's a trust issue, and of course everyone has ups and downs. But I know of PhD students who have been sitting at work in front of their computer and actually have had a psychosis. And there would be no way you could tell. We're not trained psychologists or psychiatrists. And they would have needed this help, I mean professional help, to get out of that psychosis. So, of course, it's you don't want to betray their trust, but you're actually not helping by not maybe somewhere down the line taking action with HR and maybe asking for help. And I don't think the first thing they will do is call the students. I think that's a discussion for you also to bring back to the student.
Yeah. Speaker's corner, yes.
I want to say, because I have some experience. In some cases you can do, like I had a student, he or she told me he has a depression. He or she was from a southern country, asked whether he or she could go home for a month. And I said yes. This was totally just between me and the student. And then there was a student, the case of a colleague of mine he has a very serious psychological condition. And then one had to go through FA, HR, and so on. So then the supervisor could not, on his own, do much more than having sympathy, empathy with the situation.
Yeah. So I think consulting with HR, and if you decide not to drop names, of course you can always go and just consult them, describe your experience and your view, and what should I do. That could be a starter.
Can I ask a question from Zoom?
Yes.
So it's not so easy to detangle what is academic and what is psychological. For instance, when a student doesn't feel productive in the work or dealing with the stress of research, is that academic or is it psychological?
Yeah. And it could be
a question from Aris or a comment.
Yeah. And it could be a little bit of many things. Lots of stress they will have for sure. That's something we all have lots of. So, yeah. Okay. What is good leadership? Do you want to give some examples here? You can just pop up to the mic and say, for you, what would be a characteristic thing? think about someone who you think in your life has shown some property, which is a good leadership. Yes.
Someone who's good at mediating discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, so in previous years, sometimes we've had little mini group discussions about this. Different groups listed different things. Maybe you can have a look at them and see. I see time is running out, but take a moment for yourself and think and look and see, in this list, if anything comes to your mind, what you think is a good property or a good behavior. Yeah, 2 slides of that. Yes. That was the end of my presentation. We will have a group discussion. So, on Zoom, those of you who are at Zoom, you will be divided into 3 groups. And here in this room, I will give you your rooms, your groups too. And you will be discussing the article you read. So the first round of 20 minutes is going to be all of you read the same article, or there could be groups where you have 2 articles. So you will be discussing, what aspects of the article are brought up, what are the key topics, how do you relate to these topics, and discuss this article among yourself. But also keeping in mind that in the next phase, round 2, we will be mixing. So essentially there will be 1 or max 2 persons from the same article. And you could be first briefly outlining the key points of that article, and everyone does it. And then you discuss and contrast what is similar among the articles and what is different. And then what's your take